In the previous video, we studied Deuteronomy 7, in which the Lord promised prosperity to his people in the promised land if they were to keep his commandments, to keep his covenant. And we talked about it then a little bit, but I want to focus on that now. Just as Moses does in Deuteronomy, we move on to chapter 8, where there is a very important warning that we ought not to forget that the Lord is the one who gives us our prosperity. So let's listen to Deuteronomy 8, verses 11 through 20. Take care, lest you forget the Lord your God by not keeping his commandments and his rules and his statutes, which I command you today. Lest when you have eaten and are full, and have built good houses and live in them, and when your herds and flocks multiply, and your silver and gold is multiplied, and all that you have is multiplied, then your heart be lifted up, and you forget the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, who led you through the great and terrifying wilderness with its fiery serpents and scorpions and thirsty ground where there was no water, who brought you water out of the flinty rock, who fed you in the wilderness with manna that your fathers did not know, that he might humble you and test you to do good in the end. Beware, lest you say in your heart, my power and the might of my hand have gotten me this wealth. You shall remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you power to get wealth, that he may confirm his covenant that he swore to your fathers as it is this day. And if you forget the Lord your God and go after other gods and serve them and worship them, I solemnly warn you today that you shall surely perish. Like the nations that the Lord makes to perish before you, so shall you perish, because you would not obey the voice of the Lord your God. So that is a list of things not to do. Don't forget the Lord your God. Don't be boastful. Don't say to yourself, it is my effort, my power and the might of my hands that have gotten me this wealth. We need to hear this warning because it's very tempting for human beings that the more they are blessed, the more they forget about the giver of the blessings. We like to think that it is our accomplishment. And so, even today, we may fall in this pitfall that was a pitfall for the Israelites in Moses' time, and especially shortly after. We can make the same mistake when we say, look, I have worked hard. I have sown the right seeds and I've harvested with the right equipment. I have been financially responsible. I've kept my nose clean. And that is why I'm doing so well. That's why I'm prosperous. Did you know that there are many people who do just the same right things as you do, and yet end up losing their job, having business deals that don't work out, face disease, are ruined by disaster? The fact that you have bread on the table, the fact that you have employment, the fact that you have a good reputation in society is not something that you have accomplished. Of course, there's a connection between the things that you do and the outcome, but it is not in your power to make it so. That is the work of the Lord. Whether we talk about our physical sustenance, about being able to live in a house and clothe ourselves and have food, or our spiritual state, whether we are blessed with the knowledge of the Lord and have strong faith, all of that is not because of what we did. It is only the Lord who has the ability and the power and the strength to give you those things. That is the lesson of verse 18 especially. He is the one who gives you power to get wealth. And in doing so, he confirms his covenant. He loves to bless you because that shows his covenant love to you. Now, if we go and look at these things that he gives us and say, well, I did it, then we are despising the Lord's love in the provision for us. And that is a terrible sin. In fact, Deuteronomy 8 here immediately moves on to the topic of idolatry in verse 19. Because when we look at our own efforts and say that is what God is, our prosperity, then we have created an idol. Our work, our cleverness, those can become idols. Or we can even credit other things with our prosperity, and then they are idols. So, for instance, we could say, well, we live in a prosperous world because we have the best economical system, we have a capitalist system, or we have the best political system, we have democracy, that's what makes us such a prosperous country. Well, there's no doubt that those things play a role. But don't forget, they do not give you prosperity or happiness. The Lord does. This is a very solemn warning, as Moses says in verse 19. The people who lived in the promised land before the Israelites came, they were idolaters. They credited false gods with their prosperity, and the Lord removed them from the land. Do you think that if we call ourselves Christians, are boastful and do not credit the Lord with the blessings that we receive? Do you think that if we fail to acknowledge the Lord, it will be any different for us? Jesus warned the people. There are many who say, Lord, Lord, but miss out on the kingdom of heaven. And this is one of the most common ways for people to miss out, by forgetting that the Lord is the one who blesses them. And so let's be very careful, brothers and sisters, lest we forget the Lord our God. Let's always give thanks to Him for all the things that He gives in our lives, and acknowledge it is not my power, it's not my wherewithal that gives me all this. It is only the Lord in His merciful provision.